Hello, everyone, and this is the June 2021 newsletter. Yep, it's June 1st, 2021. Can you believe it? We're almost halfway through 2021 already. Have you gotten your vaccination yet? Yes, I know some of you won't be doing that. No judgment here. But for those of you who have, how did it go? I got my first Moderna one about 3 weeks ago, and I'll be getting the second one next week. I've heard some people get some symptoms after the second shot. I hope that doesn't happen to me. I don't want anything to come in between me and getting Unfound work done. So much to do. But right now, I'm good. The episodes are great. The live show, the think tank, Unfound Now, everything continues to hum along fairly smoothly. So let's get started where we always do. Upcoming cases. June 4th, David Schrader. I will be commenting on this episode further down this newsletter. June 11th, Chance Engelbert. June 18th, Julianne Gillet. Others we are working on at this time, Michael Van Zant, Morgan Nick, Irma McCurchian, Sherry Milton. While I'm writing in this section, I need to give a huge shout out to Marky Davis, who has contacted several families and introduced them to Unfound. In fact, some of the recent and future guests have come from Marky's work. If Marky's name is familiar to you, she was the guest way back at the beginning of 2018 for the Jeremy Burt episode. Marky continues to work hard on his disappearance, in addition to everything else she does for missing persons families. Please check out her Facebook page, We Help the Missing. First topic, the books. It's happening, finally. Season 2, Volume 2 is very close to being done as I write this newsletter. My guess is it will be completed within the next week to 10 days. I know it's been a long time coming, and I want to write about that. So why has it taken this long? I'm glad you've asked. For that question to be answered adequately, I must take you back to the beginning. Well, even before Unfound existed. I have a lot of book writing experience, a ton. I've written millions of words going back to the late 1990s, many screenplays, many short stories, and at least 5 novels, not to mention all the ones I started that were never completed. I'm a person who feels very comfortable sitting at a laptop and writing. Hey, I do this newsletter, so this shouldn't be any surprise to you. This all means that when I started Unfound, I absolutely knew that turning the episodes into books would be part of the overall process. Guests would be interviewed, the episodes would come out, then sometime after that, the books would follow. Why? Because as I've said before, podcasting is still, even in 2021, a niche. Or is it a niche? N-I-C-H-E. There are millions of people, many who are younger than I am, who have still never listened to a podcast. This doesn't even take into consideration all the people older than I am who have never listened to one. In addition, there was the attitude that I want Unfound to be on all media platforms, audio, video, print, and wherever else. Eventually. Maybe not right away in 2016, but eventually. And this was all fine originally. Unfound started during September 2016. The books started sometime in 2017. The problem? Little did I know how much other stuff I would end up doing with Unfound. Really, I never could have predicted the think tank, the live show, this newsletter, Unfound Now, and several other things that go on behind the scenes. Seriously, I thought it would be a podcast and books, nothing else. Yep, I was wrong. I guess we could call this a version of quote-unquote mission creep. You can look that term up. What I also did not anticipate was the work that would be needed to put the books out. I was thinking, hey, I've written many books before, I've spell-checked them, they've been edited, no big deal. Yet little did I know how much harder it would be to publish a nonfiction book, or nonfiction books, than fiction ones. I discovered that actually there's not a lot of writing in the Unfound books. Instead, the books are very much like the episodes. 98% interviews. Well, the interviews aren't written. The interviews are spoken, and so transcriptions need to be made so that they could be put into the books. This grew to be laborious. Transcribing is hard. Even taking the auto-generated scripts from YouTube that have been created when Natasha uploads the episodes and converting them into transcripts is difficult. Yes, a bit easier, but still hard. The people I eventually found to do the transcriptions were wonderful. All listeners, mostly amateurs at transcribing. They all did fantastic jobs, and I cannot thank them enough. However, the problem was that I still needed to manage them. Did this get done? Did that get done? I still had to proofread every single one of the transcriptions after completion. Not to mention, the transcribers would contact me, I can't understand this word or this name, which was totally understandable. I guess what I'm saying is I still very much had a part in the transcription process, even though I wasn't doing them. Frankly, about mid-2018, I was getting burned out on the whole thing. The episodes, the books, the live show, etc., etc., etc. Seriously, on top of that, the website had fallen into a disarray a bit. It was a calamity, although none of you knew it at the time. But I wasn't going to quit. Ed Densel is not a quitter, and yes, I just referred to myself in the third person. Yet something had to be put on the back burner so I could get my sanity back. Thus, the bookwork had to be stopped. That's what happened. Now you know. And it's bothered me ever since. I've hated it a lot. However, I cannot deny that once the bookwork stopped, my stress eased. The episodes got better, the live show got better, the blogs on Patreon got better, and most importantly, the website became what it is now, a place where all of you can get all the material, maps, documents, pictures for the episodes. I can now talk about it. If you don't know what I mean, you can go hear episodes in 2018, 2019, where I do not mention the website at all, even though it did exist. Just by putting one thing on the back burner, many other aspects got better. That is not to say that everything is perfect. There are other parts of Unfound's presentation to the public that need to be improved, and they'll get fixed eventually, but one thing at a time. Well, at the beginning of this year, I said the books are getting caught up this year, period, one way or the other. So within the last couple weeks, the process has started, finally. Frankly, it's not going to be cheap. Why? Because before, except for the transcriptions, I was doing everything myself. I am cheap labor. But if I were to attempt to do everything myself again, the same issues would arise that happened in 2018. So, I found a guy, I think. I'm hoping Season 2, Volume 2, he is working on right now, comes out really good. And then I'll be able to hire him for the entire run of books. All 22 of them. Yes, 22. And that number doesn't even catch us up to 2021. That only gets the series to August of 2020. That's how far I'm behind. Anyway, putting these books together, doing the transcriptions, designing a cover, yada, yada, yada. A lot of work. It's going to be a huge expense. Easily into 5 figures. But it needs to get done. Most importantly, I'll be happy when it's done. Guests will get their free ones. Premium Patreon members will get some free ones. But given the expense for them, you can expect that I will be mentioning these books very, very, very often once they're available. I hope you will consider buying a couple, a few, an entire series, all of them. Overall, once they're all done, it means there will be at least 30 Unfound books out there on Amazon and elsewhere. No other true crime podcast I know turns their episodes into books. So I think that will be very impressive and will once again raise the profile of everything we do here. And audiobook versions will follow soon after. I hope for all of this to be completed. Before the end of 2021. Next topic, sabermetrics. Do you know what it is? If you don't worry. I will give you the general definition here in a moment. But first, As you probably already understand about Unfound, it is not just a podcast. It is not just an interview program. It is not just a media outlet. I do a lot of other disappearance work behind the scenes, so do my assistants, lots of things. First and foremost, though, I think of Unfound as an educational center for anything regarding missing persons cases. I'm not going to say that that was on my mind in 2016 when I started the podcast, but that is what it has become, and I love it. We want to teach people about disappearances. We want to show you what to look for when you hear about a missing persons case. We want you to not jump to conclusions like the public often does. We want to teach you to think critically about these disappearances because we believe that is what will solve these cases. In addition, this is what will slow down the rate of disappearances occurring. I believe that. Unfound on the ground. The live show, the think tank, the newsletter, Unfound Now, the books, all are educational in nature. This is the very reason I will never go to something like CrimeCon. It is a convention based on entertainment, not education. I've done entertainment in Las Vegas. I know what it looks like. It is totally separate from anything that should ever be connected to missing persons cases. This brings me to the title of this section, Sabermetrics. Have you heard of it? No? Well, let's try something different. Have you heard of Moneyball? Yes, the movie starring Brad Pitt. It was originally a book. What's it about? Moneyball details the way the Oakland A's in the early 2000s used statistics, sabermetrics, to figure out who the very best players were. More to the point, they used sabermetrics, a complex combination of baseball stats, to figure out which players were good, but didn't look like they were good. Why did the A's do this? Because they knew they couldn't compete against the Yankees and the Red Sox when it came to spending money. However, the A's believed they could find those quote-unquote diamonds in the rough by really working the stats to figure out what truly makes a good baseball team. Because of this, baseball in 2021 is a totally different game. Yes, the rules are the same. However, players are now evaluated differently. Batting average for hitters and ERA for pitchers have taken a backseat to on-base percentage for hitters and walks and hits per inning pitched for pitchers. Things like that. This has all created a much more efficient workplace in baseball. And players who look funny or hit funny or throw funny are now not judged on their outward actions. They are now judged on how they actually perform. If you've not seen Moneyball, watch it or listen to the audiobook. It's fantastic. I've listened to it 3 times already while out on the disc golf course. Fascinating. So, in a nutshell, sabermetrics was and is a new way of evaluating baseball players using statistics that never existed or were never considered to be relevant to a player's overall quality. I want to bring sabermetrics to disappearance cases. I want to do a large study that tries to come to a firm conclusion as to why some disappearances are solved in days while others go unsolved for 70 years. The only way to do that is to collect a lot of information about missing persons cases overall, both the ones that were solved quickly and the ones that remain unsolved to this day. The good news, we have about 200 disappearances that we've covered on Unfound that are unfortunately still unsolved, so it will be somewhat easy to collect data from them. The bad news, we're going to have to collect data on 200 disappearances that were solved fairly quickly. That will be much more work. But just like the books, this is going to happen. I firmly believe that if we can really get down into the deep stats of these cases, we can find some facts that eventually determine why some people remain missing and others don't. What will those stats be? I don't know. All I know is virtually any fact that can be calculated will be gathered. There may be 100 parameters for all I know at this point, maybe even more than that. I won't know until I start listing them. If stats can be used to hone in and understand and fight other types of crime, car theft, art theft, terrorism, then I think that can be done for disappearances. To this point, though, there are really no stats. In fact, even the exact number of missing people in the United States is a total guess. Unfound will spearhead this, and I'm excited about it. I truly believe that eventually, through the use of a kind of sabermetrics, investigators will be able to determine very quickly which disappearances may last longer than others by going through what will be a short but detailed questionnaire with family and friends. The only way to get there, though, is to start crunching numbers. But the next big question, who is going to do this? I'm glad you asked. Next category, next topic for this newsletter, Dr. Telesco. Of course she's next. I have a couple things to discuss concerning my good friend, Dr. Telesco, but let's start with the previous topic from a moment ago. After the last show with Grace, I brought up this disappearance study idea. I explained it to her and asked if she thought it would be something that a graduate student would be interested in doing, or even somebody in the criminal justice field who is going for his/her doctorate. Grace thought this was absolutely something that would be considered doctorate worthy. Now, what I have to do is put a proposal together, not necessarily something quote-unquote official, but something that explains my concept about what the project will be. What I'm saying is there is a good possibility that in addition to everything Unfound has done so far and continues to do, Unfound will now have a part in somebody getting his or her doctorate in criminal justice. I know, crazy. I never could have imagined it back in 2016, that a podcast that I started would then become close enough with a university that I could design a study that could help someone's education. Unreal, unbelievable, never could have predicted it. Long way to go, though, but everything is moving forward. Then there's my interview that I did with Grace last week regarding Kelly Rothwell. So sad. And I still say that David Perry is one of the worst people we've ever discussed on Unfound. And that's after covering 200 disappearances since Kelly's. David Perry has few equals in evilness. I continue to believe, and I thought this even way back in 2016, that David has killed other women. Not sure who, not sure where. But for him to kill Kelly within seconds of her coming home tells me that David has done this before. Not to a girlfriend or anything, that would be known by now, but maybe a woman he met at a bar, maybe a former coworker, a woman who only tangentially could be connected to David. I just can't believe he killed Kelly in cold blood back in 2011 and had not committed murders before that. What will it take to solve Kelly's disappearance/murder? Unfortunately, one of two things, and neither can be counted upon. David confessing or somebody stumbling upon her remains somewhere. And when I say somewhere, I mean anywhere between Florida and New York. Once again, very sad. Next topic for this newsletter, David Schrader. I think this will be the first time that I write at length about an episode before it comes out. Why am I doing this? Because this Friday's episode is a landmark case. It's not any special number. It's not the disappearance of a famous person. It's not a disappearance that is very well known. It doesn't even necessarily have the most unique facts I've ever covered. However, what the disappearance of David Schrader will give us is an almost behind-the-curtain look at the behavior of someone before he disappeared, where we will actually get a first-hand account of how this person's behavior, personality, and attitude changed in seconds. Because we've had other disappearances where the missing person seemingly walked off. Chris Sanders, Keith Fetter, Joshua Guimond, Craig Freer, J.L. Hamblin, and many more. Yet what we haven't had is a situation where people got to notice this person's change over many hours. Then that person disappeared in a very small time frame. The closest we've come to it so far was Renee Lamanna. Yet she had a history of mental illness, so her behavior was not unusual per se. David had no mental illness. Yet with David, you will hear that in those final 12 hours, he essentially became a totally different person. You will hear how he blew off his job, how he neglected one of his sons. What I think this episode will do is bring more into focus the fallacy that parents don't leave willingly. That it must always be foul play when an adult shirks responsibilities. That a person would never just leave. That he was too good a guy to take off. In addition, when you get to hear what David did over those last 12 hours, I hope you will go back and think about some of the other episodes and start to wonder if those people were going through the same thing David was. I'm sure this episode will be one I reference for years to come, because we seldom get to hear about how a person changed 180 degrees so close to the person's disappearance. As a guy who now studies disappearances and wants to know everything about them, this is the kind of case where I think this is an episode that is going to help people. Yes, we want to bring David home too, alive of course. But this is one where I'm sure other families will listen to it and will be able to apply it to their own circumstances. And in that last paragraph, I think that reveals a little bit more about me and my attitude. Yes, it was great to cover Brian Schaefer's in May of 2021. I loved having Kelly Bruce on the program. She did a fantastic job. She continues to do a fantastic job. I hope Brian Schaefer is found alive and well someday. However, from an investigative study point of view, Brian's disappearance doesn't have much to offer. I want it solved today, tomorrow at the latest. I don't even care if Unfound has anything to do with the resolution. I hope Brian Schaefer is alive and well, even if he does stay missing for the rest of his life. But it's my job to look at the big picture as well as the individual pictures. This is why, although I will talk to any family that wants to be on the program, I'm always looking for those disappearances that can increase our understanding of these cases as a whole. A good analogy would be the aviation industry. Since commercial flying started in the early 20th century, there have been thousands of crashes. All tragic, all sad, many preventable. And just about every one of them was investigated to figure out what happened. Why did that plane hit that mountain? Why did those two jets collide? Why did the pilot go left when he should have gone right? Yet despite those thousands of crashes, there are less than 100 that truly contributed to a further understanding of aviation and making it safer. Those are the ones that were landmark investigations that caused a tidal wave of change within the industry. I can list some of them so you can look them up. United Airlines Flight 173, which moved forward the idea of crew resource management. American Airlines Flight 191 increased the knowledge of aircraft maintenance. BOAC Flight 781, aircraft design. All the flights from 9/11, airport and airline security. These crashes, along with a few others, form the basis of safe air travel in 2021. Yet there have been easily over 1,000 crashes. Yes, every crash matters. Every passenger matters. Every flight crew matters. But from an air safety point of view, all crashes are not equal. For NTSB investigators, their job is to not only find the cause of each accident, but also recognize when a major step forward in safety can take place. The way I see it when it comes to disappearances, this is also my job. Yes, cover every disappearance I can, but also recognize those cases that can further our understanding, thus making disappearances less likely to happen. I think David's is one of those. You will judge that for yourself. Next category, Brandy Wells. Maybe some of you saw that remains were found in Longview, Texas within the last few weeks. A tree trimmer found them on the edge of a lake not far from where Brandy's phone and the country bar were. There was the idea circulating that these bones were almost certainly Brandy's. They aren't. We now know the remains are from a male, not a female. When this happened, I went to NamUs to see how many people are still missing in the Longview area. There are a few, not many. And yes, a couple of them are men. I have to admit that I was doubtful it was Brandy when I heard the news. Why? Well, when I hear that a tree trimmer has found remains, I start thinking that trees usually get cut back once a year or maybe every couple years. Whereas Brandy has been missing, 15 years? So how did previous tree trimmers miss her remains if those were hers? That's just how my mind works. Maybe a good comparison would be Robbie Hurt. Kind of the same situation where a road crew was clearing brush and limbs away from street signs. They came across remains that ended up being Robbie's. As we know, making sure nothing blocks street signs is an almost yearly thing. The big difference, Robbie had only been missing since 2019. So it makes sense that previous brush clearers wouldn't have seen his remains because Robbie's bones weren't there yet. He hadn't gone missing yet. What happened to Brandy Wells? I continue to believe the guy in the white cowboy hat in the video murdered her. I've not wavered from that since I first heard about Brandy's disappearance. It's obvious they left together, and it's obvious she followed him into the parking lot. Most importantly, that guy has never come forward. Do I think she could have been disposed of in the Longview area? Absolutely. Yet, at this point, I have to believe wherever her remains are, that it will take more like a hunter or hiker to come upon them than a tree trimmer or road crew. That's all I have this month. Thanks for reading, and thanks for the support.